Okay, so we should be recording here. Let me check and make sure. Yep, we are. I promised you guys an overclocking tutorial, so darn it, you're gonna get an overclocking tutorial. I switched programs. I'm now using Bandicam, so hopefully that turns out a lot better. But as you can see, Bandicam's kind of a resource hog. It's using 40% of the CPU recording this video. So that's awesome. But alright, so basics of overclocking. Now, my chip, both of the people that have asked for the overclocking tutorial have Athlon quad core 860Ks. I have an FX 8328 core. So your chip won't follow the settings that I'm going to be about to set. But you'll get a general idea as to what to do to overclock your chip. You're going to need a few programs, so what you're going to want to do, this is assuming you have nothing, we're just starting out from scratch. You're going to want to get a program called HW Monitor. So go ahead and download and install that. So get that downloaded and installed. Once that is installed, you want to get a baseline of what your system temperatures are at stock speeds. You don't want to start overclocking until you know exactly how hot your system gets under normal load. But holy crap, check that out. We're at 45. Look at all the usage on the cores. This is just from Bandicam. I have it set recording at a pretty high quality, so it's like freaking out. But my system is at stock speeds, 3.2 gigahertz base with a 3.5 gigahertz turbo boost. So as you can see, it's boosting on all of the cores. If we go to the task manager, you'll be able to see the individual core usage. So you want to keep an eye on your temperatures. Keep an eye on your minimums and maximums. As you can see, I'm running 33 degrees Celsius at about a 45% load. So that's not bad. This won't go over about 36 degrees Celsius at 100% load. So I know I'm good to overclock at least a little bit. Now I know from experience my chip will do 4.6 gigahertz at 1.368 volts. So I know that is the max that I can go on this cooler, but we're going to go step by step with this anyway. What you would do to test your stock cooling, because I do believe both of them are running stock cooling on the 860K, but I'm not incredibly sure. You want to go to Google and download Prime 95. It's free software, and this will stress your CPU to its max. This is all preliminary testing before the overclocking begins. You cannot overclock until you know the system is 100% stable, and I just closed out of that when I didn't want to. You see none of this. So there's Prime 95. So open up Prime 95. Just go to stress testing, and you want to run these small FFTs, maximum heat FPF stress test, and not much RAM tested. So you're going to fire this up and watch the temperatures. I have no idea what's going to happen with the recording once I start torture testing my system, but you'll see this start up, and then you'll see the temperatures start to rise, and this go to 100% load. Now, my system in stock configuration with auto power management on, it tries to keep the chip within a 95 watt TDP, and for some reason Prime 95 causes throttling below 3.2 gigahertz at stock speeds unless I disable auto power management, so that is normal on this chip. But as you can see, we're looking at the temperatures here. And you want to make sure to run this for about 10 minutes minimum, and make sure that none of your CPU cores fail this test. You'll see it drop off to 0% or whatever if it does. So once you've run this for 10 to 15 minutes and it passes, we can move on to the actual overclocking. I'm going to switch to the handheld camera now, so there might be a reduction in quality. But I will see you guys in just a minute. Okay, so we're on the handheld camera now, as you can see. What you're going to want to do is shut down the system, or restart, either one works. I'm going to wait for my system to shut down. And again, even though my CPU isn't the same, this overclocking tutorial will go for all chips, whether it be AMD quad cores, Intel CPUs, FX chips, doesn't matter. You can use these same basic principles for everything. But now that the system has shut down, I want to power it up and then mash delete when you see the keyboard lights come on. Mine takes a minute. There it goes. So start mashing delete. And it'll get you into the BIOS. Now, the BIOS hotkey for your motherboard could either be escape, F8, F10, or delete. It will never necessarily be the same on the same motherboard, or on a different motherboard. So once you're into the BIOS, as you can see, it says I'm running 3.214 to 3.216 gigahertz. CPU is 31 degrees Celsius, and CPU voltage is 1.224 volts. What you're going to want to do, and again, I have a gigabyte motherboard, so your BIOS may be different. You want to go to your advanced frequency settings, or it's also called advanced CPU features in some motherboards. Go ahead and click this. Now, in this control panel, you'll have BLCK control, or general system bus speed, or front side bus speed, your north bridge frequency, your HT-link frequency depending on the CPU, and your CPU clock ratio. What we're going to be focusing on is only CPU clock ratio, so this one right here. As you increase this, you'll see it changes the clock speed of the CPU. Now what you're going to want to do is, with the CPU at stock voltage, we're not going to tweak any voltages yet, you want to bump it about 100 to 200 megahertz at a time until you get the maximum stable clock speed on standard voltage for your processor without any increases whatsoever. So my stock speed is 3.2 gigahertz. We're going to go to 3.5 gigahertz and see if it passes the stress test. Now, while you're overclocking, before you apply the overclocks, I should have mentioned this first. Go into the advanced CPU settings, or advanced CPU core features, depending on your motherboard, and you're going to want to disable a few things. One of them being Turbo Boost or Core Performance Boost, whatever it's called on your board. So you're going to want to disable that. Cool and Quiet, disable that. C1E support, disable that. SVM, which is Secure Virtual Machine Mode, disable that. This is for if you're running like VirtualBox, virtual machines on one desktop, different OSs inside one machine kind of thing. Usually people disable this. You can leave it enabled. I like to disable it because I don't run virtual machines. Core C6 state, disable that. That is for, you can also leave that enabled if you want to. It doesn't really affect the stability of overclocks. It's more of whether or not you want your system to be able to hibernate. I just turn it off. And the most important one, hopefully if you have a decent motherboard, it has an option for this. Auto Power Management, or APM. You want to disable this because this will drastically throttle back your overclocks when overclocking. As you saw when I ran Prime 95 at stock speeds, it was throttling the CPU to 2.8 gigahertz on some cores, and that is caused by auto power management and its power saving features. So once you have all of that disabled, go ahead and press F10, save and exit, and the system will try to boot at 3.5 gigahertz on stock voltage. If it does not post, that is okay. You just have to take your side panel off and pull out your CMOS battery, but I know for a fact mine will post. There's also some BIOS reset jumpers usually somewhere near the CMOS battery that you can touch with a screwdriver and reset the BIOS if it fails to boot. We have to wait for the system to load back up. I don't have an SSD, so it takes a little while. I don't claim to be a professional either, so this video is probably not to the highest quality, but I'm hoping it helps you guys out, because this is pretty highly requested. And I'm going to switch back to Bandicam now, I think. And I will be back with you guys in a minute. Okay, so we're loading into the BIOS here to up the voltage a tad on the CPU. And that's going to take just a second. But yeah, so what you're going to want to do is in the BIOS, you're going to see advanced voltage settings or advanced CPU voltage settings or advanced CPU features that could have the voltage underneath that. And right now it's got the voltage set to 1.1250 volts. I'm going to take this up to, let's say, hang on, let me go back out to the menu here. This says we're at 1.128 volts. I'm going to try for the next step up, so like 1.1 or 1.135 or something like that. You want really small incremental increases in voltage. So raise this up. So there's 1.125. So we want, let's try that, 1.1325 volts. That is the next step up. Then once the system powers back up, we're going to boot in the BIOS and verify the voltage change. This is pretty much all you have to do, is keep upping the voltage and multiplier as long as your CPU is within its safe voltage and multiplier limits, or temperature and voltage limitations. As long as it's within those safety ranges, you should be good. Although this did not apply what I wanted it to, or it's not going to be enough, so I'm going to up it just a tad bit more to 1.1375 volts. It's also a good idea, and I forgot about this, to increase, if your motherboard has V-core load line calibration, or LLC, you want to set this to, I set mine to medium. That gives me the best result. So apply that, and that will help when the CPU is under load. The CPU voltage tends to drop under heavy load, so that will keep it from dipping down and making the overclock unstable. Boot back into the BIOS here and verify Okay, so now we are at 1.140 volts. So let's boot into Windows and run this stress test one more time. And I will see you guys on the desktop. Okay, so we are on the desktop at 3.5 gigahertz. There was a bit of a screw up in Bandicam. It didn't keep my audio settings, so I'm actually re-recording this part. I've already had to raise the voltage to 1.140 volts, as you will see in actually the next part of the video with the handheld camera. It would not stay stable. Core number 5 kept dropping out. Both times that I ran Prime 95. Basically, what you're looking for a stable overclock, you're looking for all cores to not lose their integrity and drop out on the stress test. If the core fails the stress test, if the system locks up, if the system reboots, the overclock is not stable and either needs higher voltage or the overclock reduced. Most likely it's higher voltage. Now, the stock voltage I was at was 1.128 volts, and I had to go to 1.140 volts, and we're going to see if this is stable now. I don't exactly remember what I covered in the handheld part of the video with the camera and the BIOS, but I have not stress tested this at 1.140 volts yet. There's a chance that it could crash. So this is fully loading the system, 100% on all cores, and we are down to 1.128 volts because of V-droop, which you should counter in the BIOS with load line calibration, of which I cover in the next segment of this video. This will probably be one of the last segments of the video. This is stable. This is really all you need to know. Keep your temperatures. Look up the maximum rated temperature for your CPU and keep it about 10 degrees under that at all times. 10 degrees Celsius underneath that. As long as you do that, you are golden. That is all you need to really know to overclock. If the overclock fails, it just needs more voltage, temperatures are too high, or some chips just don't overclock well, and the overclock needs to be taken down a notch. We didn't overclock very far. We went from 3.2 to 3.5 gigahertz. But this should give you the basic idea of what to do. It's pretty much stress test, verify stability, increase clock speed, stress test, verify stability, increase clock speed. If the stress test fails, increase voltage, and then stress test again. Windows is asking me if I want to improve the color scheme, or change the color scheme to one for better performance, since we're maxing out the system right now. It thinks the system is slow. But I hope this overclocking tutorial was helpful. If you need something even more in depth, let me know, but you should be able to get the basic idea from this video. It's just rinse and repeat. Increase clock speed, stress test. Increase clock speed, stress test. Generally, if you're running Prime 95, you want to run the stress test for at least a half an hour. Just let it sit here, run at 100%, and make sure none of the cores fail the stress test. As you can see, we're still at 100% on all 8 cores. CPU temperature is only 39 degrees Celsius at 3.516 gigahertz. So I would consider this stable. Temperatures aren't going above 39 degrees Celsius. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you didn't enjoy this video, you can dislike it and tell me why you didn't dislike it. If you want more videos like this, let me know. Be sure to subscribe and comment down below, and I will talk to you guys next time.